Wiki wiki wow. Wiki 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 wow.
Wow, wow, West. That's the cold open. That's it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our series, Best Motion Picture 2010. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Anna.
And today we're going to be doing our next episode. We're going to be talking about True Grit, one of the nominations for Best Motion Picture 2010, and one of the worst movies of the year, Jonah Hex. We're going to take it away by starting with True Grit. Our first question is, how was the story? What do you think of this story?
So, I knew that this was a remake going into it. I didn't realize there was also a book by the same title. I gave the story a 3. I thought it was a fair story. I thought that it was a good Western. I didn't think there was anything exceptionally remarkable, but I don't think it was bad. I never thought that anything was out of place in the go of it.
I agree. In my compiled notes, I have 3.54 for the score, but as I did my other ones, I was like, no, it's really closer to 3.53. So I agree with you. I'm going to give it a 3 too. I feel like the story is one of the weakest things about this adaptation. Maybe this counts more as 2 because it's so Coen Brothers-y, but I laughed out loud the entire movie. I'm not kidding. I was dying laughing. I thought this was so funny. I can't even begin to be. I was like, from the beginning with the Undertaker, you may kiss him if you would like the way he kept me. I was like, oh man, we are in for a ride. Joel and Ethan. I was dying.
I also didn't realize this was a Coen Brothers movie, but I did not have that same reaction. There was definitely some moments you may kiss him if you would like, that I was like, okay, weirdo, but I was not cracking up.
I was raised on the Coen Brothers, biannual viewings of Big Lebowski, Oh Brother Where Art Thou on repeat. Maybe that was just my predisposition to be this is that character, this is that dialogue thing. The thing I laughed out loud at in the theaters is when he's like, LaBeef is following us, we'll wait here. And that trapper dentist shows up, and Jeff Bridges is like, you are not LaBeef. The funniest thing, though, that I had to pause the movie, absolutely killed me, was, I don't know how to say his name, but Domhnall Gleeson? Is that how you say it?
Donal, tonal with a D.
Okay, Domhnall Gleeson. That scream, he admits someone he is murdered. It's, very real, but it was just what the fuck is happening?
I don't know, I feel like we watched completely different movies. I did pick up on some of those comedic things, but I did not think it was a bwahaha like Big Lebowski.
Oh, I fucking loved it.
I guess the only other story thing was, I can't believe she freaking 1 gets bit and 2 loses her arm. I thought that was the most out of left field thing. I don't understand why he cut an X around the snake bite before he tried to suck out the venom. Yeah, let's move on to the art, the acting, the direction. I gave it a 4.
Okay, I gave it a 5, so yeah.
Okay, yeah. I watched it with headphones on my iPad as it was intended to be watched. But the sound, of the fires, I feel like I could smell the fires. Oh, they were so nice and comforting. I guess I also watched this with a fever. Maybe that should be a disclaimer. I watched this when I was sick. Haley Steinfeld, love that bitch. Jeff Bridges, love that bitch. I was really surprised to see Domhnall Gleeson. I was extremely surprised to see Matt Damon. This was almost Interstellar level. Wait, Matt Damon?
Did you recognize him at first?
I did not recognize him at first. And then he was a total creepazoid.
Yes.
He's just I almost kissed you. She's 14.
He's like, although you are sickly looking and too young, I thought about it anyway.
Yeah, and then he calls her ugly. I was like, and then he spanks her and beats her with a switch at one point. I was like, what the fuck? And Jeff Bridges is just on his horse staring.
Watching it the first time, it took me to halfway through in the theater to be like, that's fucking Matt Damon. This is Matt Damon's Ned Flames. I swear to God, like he looks just a little bit like a different person enough. And then it's the things I want to talk about with like the art direction of this is just like how Coen Brothers-y it was. The dialogue and the delivery of like the fast pace, the questions, this is very Burn After Reading, very Fargo. Literally that opening scene about the coffin, arguing about the coffin is like not the same scene, but like in The Big Lebowski when they're like, we gotta get a coffee can. And there's like one scene where like Jeff Bridges is dead asleep, like disgusting on the ground, and I was like, this is The Big Lebowski, him passed out on the floor. The soundtrack and the costuming, like it was like Oh Brother Where Art Thou is wonderful, and this was like the masterfied version of that, I feel like. I don't know how many other Coen Brothers movies are adaptations. Fargo is not an adaptation of a true story. None of that shit is real. Sorry, fans. This, I feel like, was great for them to not do something extremely eccentric and still be like, woo-woo, you know, like, which is what they do.
The rapidness and the tenacity of Madi, like, super Coen-y. Oh yeah, I see the quick, like, back and forths and how, like, she confused the guy who was selling the ponies. Maybe just that, like, the costumes were Old West costumes, and they were, I think, fairly accurate to the time period. Soundtrack, I see what you mean with the, like, kind of almost parallels, but I think that was definitely more like bluegrass, folky country music, and this was way more like Western score. I don't know, not to be like, I was a film major, I don't know how many like Westerns you've seen. I literally watched 3 Westerns like in the last week. I don't want to be like, I've watched so many. I haven't watched that many, but I've watched a handful, and that's why I was like, this story and everything, like this was a good Western.
I believe they were nominated for an Academy Award for the costuming in 2010.
And I can like see why, but I also see why it did not win Best Picture.
Yes. Looking at reviews from this, I can also see why like Jeff Bridges didn't win Best Actor, especially against Colin Firth, who we have yet to discuss, you know? But 2010 Climate, what did you give it?
I gave it a 3. I gave it a fair. Okay. I remember hearing about it, Haley Steinfeld, and I don't know exactly what age, but she was like close to 14. Like she's
13 in this movie.
Yeah, okay. The real age, not like a 19-year-old they said was 14 or a 24-year-old they said was 14. I guess I will say this note here. Rango came out in 2011, I believe.
The Johnny Depp lizard movie?
Chameleon, but yes.
Chameleons are lizards.
The design of Beans, which is a character in the movie, like, is straight up like Madi. Like, she has the braids. She doesn't wear a hat. She might wear a bonnet sometimes. And she's, like, Rango's companion partner type thing of this, like, Western town he ends up saving. Have you seen Rango?
No, I have not.
It's actually a really cute little movie. Like, Rango calls her little sister, but Rango is like a film buff, so I don't know if that was more of a callback to the original True Grit, but the original True Grit, the girl has like a pixie cut.
Okay.
But like, so the influence, like Rango, if it came out the year after, may have been in production for a long time, but like, wow, the influence of Madi or True Grit was obviously big. I just feel like this shot Haley Steinfeld into the spotlight.
Definitely.
It was a star-studded cast. People were talking about it. It was pretty decent. I thought it was pretty relevant and discussed, and it was good back then. I gave it a fair.
I'm gonna give it a 4. I agree with all of the things. Comes from like those 10 Academy Awards. Reviews said it was good, but not like astounding. And then this made a ton of money. This was the Coen brothers' most profitable film, I think, to date. Top 3 at the box office from the weekend it came out until Never Say Never released. People were seeing it continually. I saw it, so I don't know, that speaks for something.
It now, I gave it a 2.
Okay.
I don't know how many people are like revisiting this. It's not one that I like forgot about. I don't think I see like memes of it really. I don't know. It's maybe not one people talk about, but I think if you were like, oh yeah, True Grit from 2010, people wouldn't be like, huh?
Yeah, people would know what you're
like,
talking about.
Jeff Bridges with an eye patch, that girl with the braids. I don't really have a backup for why I gave it a 2.
Oh, that's fine. Well, it's like unnoticed. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's the one where it's like, eh. I gave it a 1. Because trying to find research about this, blah blah blah. Continually what came up, there's a bunch of like races and marathons and cyclothons, all called like the True Grit Triathlon, the Western Australia True Grit like race, True Grit virtual bike ride. Like there's a lot of things like that. Don't know how long these things have been going on. One of them I saw like takes place in Arkansas. Is this something that like the original book or the original movie inspired? Maybe this had a resurgence when this film came out, and obviously like these races still exist. This phrase, true grit, we worked at camp and grit was one of the tremendous 10, you know? So like grit was like forced on the scene. I remember going to see this movie, like I didn't understand what grit was, and like now, you know, like that's ingrained in me and brainwashed in me. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I know what you're trying to say. I maybe sort of agree. I don't know just how often, I heard the word grit before I worked at camp. Like, that totally is, like, I feel like an outlier experience that I should try to not take into account.
Well, and also, that is an outsider experience, but in education, that was also a big movement, I'd say a few years after this movie, of trying to instill grit in your students. Grit was like a professional development term. How to keep your kids when they're stuck on a difficult math problem to use grit and push through and continue to try to problem solve or to keep working through something. I do feel like grit as a term did have a much bigger resurgence a little bit after this movie. I don't know that anyone's looking for this. And like, I'm a big Coen Brothers fan, blah, blah, but like, if I want to sit down and rewatch a Coen Brothers movie, I'm gonna watch The Big Lebowski. I'm gonna watch Raising Arizona. I'm gonna watch Your Brother, Where Art Thou? What did you think of the marginalized persons?
I gave it a 1 because the only one I could recall was he an enslaved person at the Undertaker?
I don't know.
But besides that, I'm like, was there anybody? I don't remember.
There was like not only her servant or potentially slave, which not a good look. When she buys the horse, the boy she buys it from is a little black boy who works in that stable. Rooster lives in the back of that Chinese grocer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I'm like, he's a man with a small business. Go off.
I recall all those characters now that you say them. I remember this movie, but like, I was sick. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, we never see her servants. We never see any. They don't have their own individual. I don't want to say lives, but they are just there. I don't know. I don't think it was really great. What did you give it? A 1?
No, on us discussing it and being like, well, I don't know the names of any of those people, so I'm like, eh. Because at first I was like, 3, but now I'm like, 2. I noticed it as a thing, but it's like, it's still not great.
I'll give it a 2 because it wasn't great. There was very little and it wasn't great. And okay, did you find in this hilarious romp of yours, did you find any gay shit?
I did? Did you?
No.
3 or 4 times in the movie, Rooster calls Madi sis. He's like, hold on, sis. I don't know, it's like, and I didn't write down the line because it was right at the beginning. The man she's like got the ponies from is trying to sell the ponies back to or whatever. He makes some joke at her father's expense, like, oh, I know all about the type of men your father runs in company with, or something like that. And I was like,
Manson Family Disclosure?
No.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think there was one.
The movie was understandable on its own. Did I learn like, oh, it was adapted to a book, or it was from this? Like, that still doesn't change the fundamental understanding of the movie.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Let's just go through.
Yes.
So, I gave this story a 2 ?
Because you didn't notice if there was one?
Sort of. I don't think it was a bad story. Like, it wasn't like, holy crap, that was bad. I was like, this story was weak, The dialogue was cheesy at times, but I feel like it wasn't as cheesy as like burlesque.
Very fair comparison. Yeah, sometimes Josh Brolin would give off like the 50th one-liner in 15 minutes, and I was like, ugh. But at least it was like, seemed like something a comic book character would do.
And I feel like that is a big note. This is a comic book Western movie, and I feel like that is almost its downfall.
Okay.
Almost. It's so comic booky.
Because the effects are so cartoonishly bad.
I don't even want to talk about that. Not yet. That's an art. Here's the biggest thing. Jonah Hex' ability to raise/speak to the dead isn't even in the comic books! Pardon!
I was like, bitch! What? That was the one thing I liked about the story, and it was bastardized!
What the fuck is his abilities in the comics?
He's Batman, but a cowboy. He doesn't have any.
This shouldn't have been Jonah Hex. This should have been that fucking new super ability person. Like, you could have went with that and done something completely better and different. This was not as bad as, say, Wild Wild West or Burlesque, but holy freaking crap.
The one thing about the story, I gave it a 1. Couldn't follow it for the life of me. I think the end, they threw Dragon Balls at Washington, D.C. and somehow didn't blow up. Like, that's what happened. Why did Michael Fassbender blow up a train? Huh?
You raise a great point. I was following, and I was somewhat entertained. Somewhat.
So quick to defend. Somewhat.
5% of me was like invested. It was a cool ability in character, and I was like, what are they gonna do with this?
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible.
My last 2 notes from the movie is, damn, even the score is bad. I looked away and now John Malkovich is dead. And then I just stopped taking notes.
Fair. Like, that's
bad.
They could have taken this really cool concept, but they attributed it to this already established character, and it really, that fucked them up.
Yes.
And the score was done by like some band. I don't know why they made it like a Mad Max fucking score.
This score, I think every person on this crew besides the cast started as one person, and some step of the way they were changed completely to another person to accommodate the completely different direction of this movie. Like, someone started on this score and a third person finished it.
Let's move on to the art. Holy crap. Let me take a moment here. This cast, oh my god, how did they assemble all of these people for this movie? We've got Josh Brolin, Megan Fox, Mami, John Malkovich, Michael Fassbender, Will Arnett, and Lance Reddick. The wasted potential of all these people. Oh my god.
Yes. That was the thing for me that I was like, I need answers. Because the one person you didn't mention is one of my favorite actors of all time, John Gallagher Jr., who only does like film and television. If this is an incredible story, I'm connected to this person has a really good reputation. What did they start with that they got these people together? Because lies must have been told. JGJ is my person that I know, like, something went wrong and there was no way to get out. Michael Shannon's in this movie. Like, what the fuck?
Megan Fox at first turned down the role because she was like, that's misogynistic as fucking violent. And so they did a rewrite, and then she was like, oh, Josh Brolin's in it, I guess I'll join.
This must be a really well-loved comic book character by many people, and I'm just not someone, I don't know DC Comics at all.
I hardly know DC Comics. Jonah Hex, I don't want to compare him. I don't know, before Ant-Man had a movie, I would think it was someone like Ant-Man, like, that's a fucking superhero? What?
Yeah.
Michael Fassbender, here's the thing that really made me go, I'm gonna do some research. Because that also took me a while to be like, no, that is Michael Fassbender. He had the tattoos, right? I was like, what is this character and why does he have tattoos? Because those tattoos, I immediately was like, oh, those are like Maori tattoos. LOL, they're actually the women's Maori tattoos because the men's cover their whole face. And someone else on jonahhex.blogspot.com also made this comment in 2009, and they were like, this character, Burke, does not exist in the books, in the comics. If you're gonna put native-esque tattoos on somebody, get a native person! Why did you choose Michael Fassbender with an Irish accent? Like, those are not Celtic-ass tattoos. That whole thing infuriated me.
The one thing I'm gonna say about this that I liked, I thought that the Phantom of the Opera half of the face makeup was good.
No, I thought that was pretty decent. I thought it's funny, though, that to apply the prosthetic, he had to shave that half of his face for like 6 months or whatever, so he walked around with half a beard.
You know what was like really shameful with the art of this? The animated sequence where they were just like, here's Jonah Hex's whole story. Why would they not use like panel to panel comic book style if it was a comic book?
Let's move on to 2010. I gave it a 1.
Okay.
Maybe, if anything, I saw pictures of Megan Fox in a corset and I was like, oh, holy moly. I definitely didn't like see this movie. People weren't like, yeah, this movie.
I gave it a 2, because like there was probably a huge following of DC fans that were very excited for this movie, and I'm just not one of them. I do remember this movie coming out. I remember seeing a poster for it at like the Carmack cinemas near where we grew up and being like, that looks horrible, and I hate cowboy stuff, but I remember being like, that movie's gonna be bad, and I was right. This movie lost $36 million.
Of course it did. Did you watch it?
It also came out the same weekend as Toy Story 3. Like, that was supposed to be, like, the gritty boy equivalent. I literally read somewhere for the audiences that weren't going to Toy Story 3 is why they picked this weekend. I think they even moved up the release date.
Dang.
I know.
Terrible. Now, I mean, I gave it a 2.
Same.
I literally saw a picture of Megan Fox in a corset like on Twitter last week. All like that blogspot post or like any post I searched for was all from like before its release. No one's really like talking about it.
I feel similarly. It's like no one's really talking about this. There are still fans of Jonah Hex out there. The one current post I saw was from a subreddit page being like, 10-year anniversary, so sad that this movie was bad. And like all of the comments were like upset and like sad and ashamed that it was so bad and then like hoping for a reboot. I saw somewhere that in 2019 there was talks to a reboot. I don't know if that's happening. I didn't see anything further than one place it said that. And Jonah Hex is now in like the Arrowverse. More than one episode on the show Legends, which I didn't look further into. It's just like, well, yeah, just the same way that like Spider-Man shows up in the MCU because he's Spider-Man, he's in the MCU. Like, yeah, of course, eventually Jonah Hex should show up in one of the episodes of like any of the Arrowverse TV shows.
So in the one flashback, when we finally see his wife, who's like played by Julia Jones, but then there's another scene with Native Americans.
And a crow flying out of Josh Brolin's face.
Was this depiction of Native Americans even like necessary? This depiction? I'm gonna say no.
I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know where to begin.
The only thing that happens with his wife, with Julia Jones, is that she gets like
murdered.
Not kidnapped, but getting taken by the men while he gets dragged outside, and then she gets murdered. So obviously not a great depiction. And then the shaman scene, no, just no.
And that was the only mention of any people of color during the Civil War era movie.
No.
What?
Lance Reddick Smith is like his gun supplier. That's a black man.
Yes. Okay, never mind. You're right.
It's 1875 or 76. And he says like, yeah, I'm taking my family to the celebration because we're free. I was like, all right. Lance Reddick was doing his like Papa Legba voice. He's also like in The Wire and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's Papa Legba. I wrote a paragraph, and I'm gonna read it. Okay, was the depictions of the enslaved people on West Bentley's estate or the natives needed? Yes, it's like accurate. However, this is like fiction, and I can't imagine that it was crucial to have people like walking around in the background. Not necessary, not needed. I'm glad they did have Smith, that gun supplier, be a black man, because it was at least like, yeah, like why not? I was also thinking, who in 2010 would have been, like, why couldn't Jonah Hex have been black? Was that too Wild Wild Westy? Or why not? If they were gonna change that he has these superpowers, why not change other things about him?
Well, Jonah Hex could be black is like that. Also, like the idea that like he doesn't fit in society. Like it's like, well, then why wasn't he played by a black man? You know, like that would have fit pretty well. Or like mixed race. Or, like,
he was a Confederate soldier. I don't know if you know this, and not to go all historian. So many slaves fought on behalf of their owners, and it was the rich man's war, but the poor man's fight. Jonah Hex really could have been black. And I feel like it would have added that another deeper layer of why he might hate the country. This was not a slave story. We don't need slave stories or police brutality stories or horror stories like them on Amazon Prime. There were definitely opportunities. If they took so much liberty with his abilities, with characters like Michael Fassbender's character, with other things, why could there not have been more inclusion? This is a fictional comic book world. It could have been so much more colorful. It was the Wild West. And like almost maybe this same thing with True Grit. There was lots of different people in the Wild West. Like, if they were going to take so much liberties with Jonah Hex, take it all the way.
Hell yeah.
And make it better and worthwhile. Did you find any gay things in the movie?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I was like, the only thing I would say is like, no, Will Arnett with that mustache is fucking gay. Or whenever he walks up and he's like getting shaved, like he's very sissy in that moment when he's like, okay, that's enough. Like Jonah Hex is here.
Okay.
But that's, even that, I'm like, no, I'm just Will Arnett and that mustache. Manson Family Disclosure, I put a question mark and then question mark no.
I think it's a no, because like when that DC comic book logo comes at the beginning, it's like, okay, like that's where this came from. Obviously the whole superpowers thing, I was like, well, what? That's not real, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I still think I understood the movie, even though now I just hate it more. Like, what was the last movie we did?
Clash.
Oh, yeah, God.
Yeah, even though it's like those superpowers aren't even canon, like that didn't change my comprehension of the movie. Yeah, Jonah Hex, like I watched it last night and I was really fired up about it. I was like, this could have been so much more. I wish they hadn't like wasted this concept on an already established character.
Ones across the board.
So those were our thoughts on the Western movies of 2010 and of this edition of Best Motion Picture. Please share your thoughts with us at Silly Sickos across all social medias. We obviously had a lot to say, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about them as well. So until next time, I don't have a closing line. Bye!
Watch out for rattlesnakes. Bye!